Welcome back to the Leadership Circle, where real leaders share real strategies for growth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Asia's first corporate service provider roundtable, hosted by Digital GoWare, your go-to marketing firm for international expansion. Now, this is one of its kind of an event designed to address the opportunities and challenges faced by European businesses looking to establish their presence in Singapore. I'm Harpreet, a qualified company secretary with corporate experience, including my time with a leading non-banking financial company. Now, as content director at Digital GoWare, I combine my passion for writing and strategy. And I'm beyond excited to be moderating today's session with all you industry stalwarts out there and extend my warm welcome to all of you. Really appreciate your presence there. Mhm. In this roundtable, we'll dive into the crucial insights needed for European businesses to successfully navigate Singapore's business landscape, from incorporation and compliance to scaling and talent acquisition. To begin, we have a keynote address from Bhargavi, the CEO of Digital GoWare. She's a national award-winning marketer and LinkedIn top voice for B2B marketing strategies. She has helped numerous businesses scale internationally. She's also called as a cross-border marketing expert. Bhargavi, over to you now.
Hello all, and thank you, Harpreet, for a warm welcome. With 14,000 plus European companies made Singapore as their homes, and more than half of the total trade in services between Europe and Singapore is already digitally delivering and accounted for 55% of total European trade in 2022, which was worth 43 billion euros. The European Singapore Digital Trade Agreement will boost this trade connection and provide further opportunities for the growth. And hence, we at Digital GoWare thought to get the stalwarts of the industry to guide European businesses like yours who can thrive in 2024-25 and many more years to come in Singapore. So let's start with our panelists, and thank you so much everyone for your time. We start with the first, Andrew Gelbe, Managing Director at Sovereign Group, who has a deep expertise in corporate governance, trading, operations, and post-incorporation management. With 40 plus years of experience, Andrew has overseen successfully running businesses across Singapore and Southeast Asia. Thank you, Andrew, for coming for this event. Next, we have Mr. Amitabh, Director and Country Head at Pan Singapore. As an expert in finance, risk management, and business processes outsourcing, Amitabh specializing in helping companies streamline operations, ensuring compliance. Thank you, Amitabh, for taking out your time.
Hello, welcome.
Next, we have Mr. Amzan, the managing partner at RHT Law Asia LLP, chairman, and the Asia Plus Group. Amzan is a leading expert in merger and acquisitions and a corporate finance, driving technology adoption and regional transformation across ASEAN. He's also an ad hoc tutor at the National University of Singapore Law Faculty and a regular speaker on M&A, IPOs, and regulatory compliance. Thank you so much, Saya, for your time today.
Thank you everyone.
And we have Ivan. Ivan, director and co-founder at Vivos, specializing in setting up businesses in Singapore. Ivan has helped 1,000 plus European entrepreneurs like yours to kickstart their journey in Singapore and scale it up across Asia. So thank you, Ivan, again for joining us today. And let's begin.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Okay, so my first question is to you, Bhargavi, extending the keynote address that you discussed about EU Singapore Digital Trade Agreement. What do you think are the main benefits of EU's deal with Singapore in terms of digital trade?
I think the EU deal with Singapore is first of its kind agreement, which will benefit both businesses and consumers at both sides, bringing our economies closer together while representing a significant step forward for the European to globally expand quickly. Um, Three things that I would probably highlight here. One is what will happen is digitally enabled trade in goods and services will facilitate ensuring cross-border data flow. The free data flow will help in unjustifying the barriers and enhancing it, and then enhancing the trust in the trade, including strong rules on the spam, etc., will actually help in bringing and boosting both the economies and coming them closer.
Thank you, Bhargavi. It's fascinating to see how this agreement is reshaping the digital landscape. My next question is to you, Evan. Let's talk about market entry. Many companies compare global hubs like Singapore, Dubai, and Hong Kong when deciding to establish a regional base. From your experience, Yavan, what makes Singapore the preferred choice for European businesses? And also, how does it stand out compared to these other hubs?
Yeah, it's a great question, Harpreet. The perennial question everyone's been asking for the last 15 years I've been in this region, and the answer keeps evolving, but Singapore's always been up there in the mix. Of course, what's the purpose of coming to Singapore, coming to this region? You're trying to tap into the opportunities and the new fast-growing markets that exist in this part of the world. Um, if you're looking and if you're focused on on Asia, then obviously I think that Singapore has an edge over Dubai. Dubai is a great market entry, great vehicle for Gulf Cooperation Council economies, and um, but it has obviously some disadvantages in terms of ease of business, trust, reputation, and talent base compared to Singapore. Singapore versus Hong Kong, obviously, both are very strong leading financial centers, offshore centers, trading hubs in Asia. But certainly over the years, we've seen that Hong Kong's proposition has evolved more towards a greater China focus, whereas Singapore has been more ASEAN and Asia Pacific and even global south, international, the whole world. So Singapore has positioned itself really well, very strong ease of business in terms of number two in the world, and they've consistently worked at keeping it to the easiest place in the world to do business. Very attractive taxes, great talent base, and just a whole hub of resources and support that you'd need to grow your business in Asia.
Thank you, Ivan. That's really insightful. Singapore clearly offers many strategic advantages. Now, once the decision is made to set up operations in Singapore, the many businesses still face challenges. Ivan, what are some of the key pain points European businesses typically encounter when entering the Singapore market? Also, how can they overcome these hurdles?
So the good news is that all of these hurdles have been overcome very successfully by those 14,000 European companies that are thriving in Singapore that Bhargavi mentioned at the beginning. But certainly, it's a new culture. It's the new regulatory environment. It's a new set of regulations and rules. But really, I think many of our clients find that with a little bit of adaptation, some advice and support from their partners, that they find that the rules, the tax setup, for example, the employment rules, the social security rules are all very simple, particularly much more flexible, much more easy to understand than they are in many European markets. But they are different, and how you operate here has to adjust. I think the hardest thing that most people adjust to is just adjusting to the different culture, the different business practices, getting used to how business is done here, how relationships are built over time. Many people have questions around how they can re-domicile assets or intellectual property and how to navigate through that process. But there's a lot of experts in Singapore who understand how to do this well, and there's many that have beaten that path before and thrived and grown their businesses here.
Absolutely. Understanding and overcoming these initial hurdles can set a tone for long-term success. And with you, corporate service providers by their side, I think they do good. Uh, Next question to you, Ivan, is one challenge business often faces managing immigration and visas for their employees. Is it easy for European businesses to navigate the visa process for their employees in Singapore? And what should they keep in mind during this process?
Mm. It's no doubt that this is an area that many of our clients are a little bit nervous about coming in. They have their key people, their key talent, that they want to bring into the market to help capitalize on the opportunity, and they're uncertain around how they can do that. I think over the last couple of years, Singapore has clarified the situation. We've had a points-based system for the employment pass introduced. I find that working with clients now, it's much simpler, it's much clearer who can come and what's required to get that employment pass approved, to bring in your managers, your key talent, your corporate staff. And the government is a very commercial perspective on all of this. And for people who are interested in bringing investment and business to Singapore, then there's generally a pretty welcoming approach compared to many markets globally. But I would advise that it's good to get the advice of an expert and a specialist to help you through how to make that process as smooth and as easy as but many of our clients find that the process is quite painless once they've completed it.
Okay. Thank you, Ivan. That gives us a clear picture of what businesses should consider regarding integration. Andrew, my next question is to you. When expanding into Singapore, choosing the right business structure can have a long-term impact on a company's operations and success. Could you explain the different business structures that companies can consider? Also, based on your experience, which would you typically recommend for European businesses? Also, the third part of this question, what are the common mistakes do companies often make when making this decision?
Thanks. Thanks, Harpreet. Um, well, in Singapore, the European companies, as well as other international companies, often consider how they're going to enter the market. And the common strategy is to consider, first of all, a rep office or a branch office, a branch of the of the European company, or to set up a subsidiary of the European subsidiary. And I think a lot of people feel more comfortable, perhaps if they're unsure about the market, to look at the branch as particularly the easiest step to test the market, and and that's fine. It does allow sort of relatively quick access into Singapore and a legal base to to consider expansion in the region. But there's like two parts that we often discuss with the European companies, and one is that these operations, they move in a established European business into Asia under a branch. It doesn't limit any liability, of course. So anything that happens with that expansion into Asia is the liability is held with the parent company, which often makes European companies a little bit nervous that it potentially is preferable from a risk point of view to uh, put the risk into a subsidiary and limit the liability. And another aspect is tax as well. Like, people like Singapore because of the favorable rate of tax, and only applies with a separate entity. So a branch, normally any profits made through a branch would be fully taxable back in Europe. So I think that these are the two big parts of like the decision as to which type of structure should be used to enter into the Singapore market.
That's very helpful overview, Andrew. It's clear that getting the structure right from start can save a business a lot of challenges later on. Andrew, my next question is to you. Once a business is incorporated in Singapore, ensuring smooth operations and compliance is key. From your experience, what governance practice should European business prioritize, sort of post incorporation, to stay compliant with Singapore's regulatory framework? And are there any common mistakes that you've seen?
Yeah, well, like, leading on from what Ivan mentioned earlier about the whole myriad of different challenges that European clients can face moving to Singapore, I think the first thing I would say is that what what's unique to Singapore is that there's the need to actually appoint a corporate secretary. So that's not the case in every country. Some, like for example, in the UK, where we're from, you don't need to appoint a corporate secretary. You can do it yourself. In Singapore, you must appoint a corporate secretary. So the good news is that professional firms like the people on this panel, we will help you with that. And what I find is my corporate secretaries, they do much more than just the regulatory statutory filing. Basically, they will help you with immigration. They'll help you with obtaining licenses to operate, and they'll really be sort of a point of contact to help foreign clients to uh, to establish themselves in Singapore. So I guess from a corporate governance point of view, what do these corporate secretaries help with? It's a little bit unusual, and there was two things that sprung to mind that European clients tend not to have seen before. One is the register of controllers that we have in Singapore, and the other one is the compliance with having to have a local resident director. Indeed, there's another register called the Register of Nominee Directors, which is often something that most European clients, even the mention of nominee directors, are fairly cautious. So the corporate secretaries will help you navigate this and make sure that that's filed every year to maintain compliance with Singapore regulations. So just to expand quickly on what those are, the controller is often mistaken from director, because obviously the director's controlling the company. Then you've got this register of controllers, but really it's the controllers to identify who has 25% ownership of the company and control through and control is defined as being able to add and replace directors rather than the management of the company. But the big one potentially, like, and again, we could probably have a whole seminar on this one, is the local resident director requirement, because sometimes we see European companies that are expanding into the region. They might be sending a team of people here, but they don't want nobody suitable to be a director of the company. So what do you do? Because the people that are being employed here on employment passes might be quite senior in the firm, but they're not quite suitable to be a director of the company. But yet you need a local director to be, or you can't set up a Singapore subsidiary. This is a challenge people have, and there's almost a whole industry that's established as a result to meet that need, where you can speak to a third party to appoint a local director to satisfy that need. But that has been that's something that needs advice, needs to be taken carefully, and has been subject to more regulation recently in Singapore. So that's something that is something needs to be um, monitored carefully. Like, so some mistakes that are made is sometimes senior people are appointed. Like, so a local resident director can be a Singaporean national or PR, or a foreigner that joins as an EP, an employment pass. But sometimes, like European clients, will get an employment pass, but they won't actually live in Singapore, and they'll still be based in Europe, and they'll put themselves as a local resident director, thinking that's fine, but actually that's not fine. Like, if the authorities are aware of that, they'll not be overly happy. It should be someone that's living in Singapore. So that's potentially a mistake that's sometimes made.
That's really great point, and very insightful about the local appointment of local directors and nominee directors. Businesses need not to only set up their business, but they also need to be sure that they stay compliant as they scale. Um, Ivan, my next question is to you. Singapore's pro-business environment supports both large companies and smaller startups. How does Singapore support smaller companies, particularly in terms of grants, incentives, or tax breaks? And how can European startups take advantage of these opportunities?
I think what's one thing that's really positive about the Singapore ecosystem and the Singapore government embrace of trade and business is that they treat all companies that are incorporated in Singapore essentially the same. If you're incorporated in Singapore, you are a Singaporean company, and they will vouch for you, they will support you, they will weigh in just to help you grow and expand in the region. They are eager for all businesses that come to Singapore to grow into the region and to expand. So they have teams on the ground at those markets, which will help you with market expansion. There are grants and programs that you can tap into to assist with that. But it's their knowledge, it's their reputation and their connections that are all often the most valuable, as well as the fact that the Singapore government is there. Their officers, their talent, their scholars are there across the region, advocating for us Singapore companies if there's any issues in the region, and this can be a little bit more of a complicated place to do business. So that stands us a great stead that we have the brand and the strength of the Singapore government behind us all. And from small points to big points in terms of tax incentives for new companies, Singapore is certainly very pro-business place. You'll find that the environment is somewhat different to many of the European countries, and that shows itself up in terms of how the government interacts with the companies, as well as the incentives and the grants and the programs. But I think the most meaningful part, the most impactful part, is the way that the government weighs in to support and help. And anyone who's trying to grow their business will find that they get ample support.
That's excellent, Ivan. Leveraging these opportunities can give startups a competitive edge. Also, we can easily say that Singapore government has their backs at all times. The European businesses backs will got it. Amitabh, my next question is for you. Now, hiring skilled talent is often one of the biggest challenges any businesses entering a new market will face. Is it easy for European firms to find skilled and trained employees in Singapore? And what should they focus on when building teams here to ensure that they get the right talent?
Great question, Margavi. See, in terms of hiring talent in Singapore, whether it is for European companies or US companies, the challenges are the same, right? So what happens? Singapore, as a country, they have a robust education system, the foundation of the local talent pool in terms of tertiary education, institute of higher learning. Produce industry ready graduates here. and and if you look at Singapore in terms of talent in the global talent competitiveness index is by INSEAD, they are the second most talented means country in the world, and in most talented in Asia Pac for that matter. Here, the government also supports the local talent, and they have a free website for Europe for everyone, uh, for all the companies to advertise like careers futures. You can also skills future the way to get a local talent. You can go to WSC. They have a growth support scheme. They have a tech SG, which the administrative program by EDP and Enterprise Singapore, which supports businesses in growing and scaling the teams. Yeah. So it's no doubt it's a competitive market, but yes, you have the talent here, and those guys are really good. So
Okay, that's great, Amitabh. Talent acquisition is definitely a key to ensuring sustainable growth in a competitive market. And with Singapore government by your side, by the businesses side, it's all the more easier. Amitabh, next question is Singapore plays a critical role in facilitating trade and investment between Europe and Asia. How can European businesses leverage Singapore's position to strengthen their presence in Asia?
I didn't the question, please.
I'm saying, how can European businesses leverage Singapore's position to strengthen their presence in Asia? As in, how they can expand to Asia once they come to Singapore.
Oh, got it. Yeah. So see, as Ivan also said, that Singapore has a geographical position at the heart of Southeast Asia. Okay. So, and it provides unparalleled connectivity to the region's rapidly growing markets. If we get market access not only to Singapore, in terms of is a springboard to access the diverse consumer markets of Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam. We are Singapore, the founding member of the ASEAN when it was established in 1967. So there are 10 countries in ASEAN. So it also opens the door to ASEAN. And ASEAN countries are privileged in a recently we have FTA, foreign trade agreements. We have double taxation agreements with all these countries. So it there are 690 million people in ASEAN, if you look at that, and the GDP of 2.9 trillion that is building at. So, and if you further look at it in terms of population at the age of the median ages of ASEAN countries is 30 years. If you look at compare, if you calculate US 39, 49 in Japan, 38 in US, 42 in Europe. So this is a very, very big advantage to uh, if European companies come to Singapore, so they get young talent uh, in Singapore and in ASEAN. Now, after this, you look at the world infrastructure, efficient logistics, transportation networks ensure seamless movements of goods and between people, Europe and Asia. At the same time, if you look at the advanced infrastructure, which is like the fiber optic networks, the data site, the digital platforms, all business operations and communication for that matter. This, the Ivan, Andrew, both of them said about this that Singapore has a very stable political climate where their regulations are very, very transparent, clear, efficient. I mean to say, they facilitate business setting up, operations, and compliance. You want to incorporate a company, you can incorporate. If you have the documents, you can incorporate in less than an hour. So they have tax incentives for that matter. We have in if you look at neighboring countries, if like Indonesia, Batam happens to be for Singapore, it happens to be a export processing zone. The skilled workforce, for that matter, can support European businesses in navigating the Asian market. I'm very sure about that. If you look from the financial point of view, it's a financial hub with a very robust financial services sector, which offers wide range of banking, insurance, investment services to support the European business. The Singapore dollar's stability can help European businesses to mitigate the risk.
It's amazing, Amitabh.
Yeah, you look for investment, government support. Government has given investment incentives, partnerships, needs in tax breaks, grants, and the Singapore government also promotes collaboration between European and Asian businesses through JVs and tech transfer programs, and they are ready to talk. The thing is that EEB and the government, they're all ready to talk and collaborate, and they can tailor make things for you. So it's all possible. And if you look at the research and R&D, Singapore is supposed to be the R&D hub for in terms of, let us say, water, e-commerce. Most of the e-commerce holding companies are here because it's easier to manage a plant. Yeah, the leadership skills here, and have your teams elsewhere in ASEAN, and also means the core team stays here. It really helps. So by leveraging these skills, I would say that Singapore can certainly play a vital role in bridging the gap between
Singapore can be a launchpad to APAC and ASEAN.
yeah, exactly. That is what my thing is. Means it is a strategic bridge between Europe and Asia, facilitating trade, investment, economic growth for both the regions.
Amitabh, coming to our next question. Managing HR and payroll, especially across borders, can be complex for a business. What key strategies should European firms adopt to navigate these challenges efficiently?
See, there are no means there is no everything has to be tailor made for every company. There is nothing like over the counter for that matter. Depends what the requirements are. But yes, from a strategy point of view, you should understand the Employment Act here, and the Employment Act is not only means not enough. You also need to know the tripartite alliance, what they say, because they are a quasi law. So you have to look at the minimum wage, working hours, leave entitlements, termination procedures are very complex in Singapore for that matter. So uh, then you have to look at the social security in terms of CPF, understand the CPF, the mandatory requirements to saving scheme, and the deductions for like SENDA, CDAC, and ECF and all that. Um, so it's different for different people. For foreign worker, policies are very different here. Like if you're hiring a foreign worker, you have different types of passes, which category you are hiring. They were hiring on a employment work permit, or S pass, or a P2 pass, or they are on PEP, or they are tech pass. So depends how. So you need to hire for that matter HR consultant, or you need to have a EOA, employer
HR and payroll are
area. So you need to hire local experts to help you um, in on HR practices, labor laws, cultural nuances also are very important, because that is how you assimilate. If you don't understand the culture, it's very difficult to have a good team.
definitely.
Yeah. So this will ensure compliance with local regulations, and also reducing the risk of penalties and legal issues in the long term. Then you can also consider payroll outsourcing as a strategy, because in that case you have to manage that. So it can be even more cost effective for a company which enters Singapore, for a European company which enters Singapore, than hiring and managing in-house payroll team. So adapt HR practices to local culture in terms of communication styles, expectations. Singapore has a very unique style of means and Singaporean accent, everything. So it's very, very different. The way we call it English. So you need to understand that. At the same time, you need to count in terms of performance management, tailor performance evaluation, feedback methods to local preferences. We should that offer benefits valued by Singaporean employees like healthcare, childcare, subsidies, flexible, I would say, work at work arrangements, which is very popular, means that is now popular across the world. So also look at the cultural integration because you're coming here with a um, different mindset, and you come to Asia and especially Singapore and Singapore is a very different world. So you need to understand that very, very different people who live here. You need to get integrated with that, yeah. And also always seek professional advice instead of trying to do all.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for those insights, Amitabh. Azman, my next question is for you. Singapore is often praised for its ease of doing business, but navigating a new market always comes with new challenges. From a legal perspective, what are the key legal and regulatory hurdles that European businesses should be aware of when expanding into Singapore?
Maybe I should answer that question in a rather interesting way. Perhaps there are actually quite few. Um, in a sense that for the EU, where so much that you understand about regulation, a lot of Singapore is actually very pro-business, as Andrew, Ivan, and Amitabh has actually mentioned. So a lot of Singapore is actually, as much as a lot of people like to complain that Singapore is highly regulated, but it's extremely pro-business in the sense that the country sees itself as the springboard into the rest of Asia. And there's something important about this in a sense that this gives us an understanding about how rules and regulations will be formulated in Singapore. Singapore sees itself as a gateway into a larger ASEAN market of about 660 million people. So in that sense, a lot of how we regulate ourselves seems very much in line with trying to help foreign investors come into Singapore so that we can bring you to the rest of the region. Now, let me also point out a few things relating to some of the key legal aspects, or maybe even you might say some of the key regulatory aspects of how things can be done a little differently in Singapore. Now, in Singapore, there exists an organization called the Economic Development Board, which is in the business of attracting business into Singapore. Now, it also awards grants where at least 30% of the equity is locally held, and it provides tax breaks for innovation. Now, what it really means is that premium is placed on innovation if you meet the local equity requirements. Now, this also means that startups like what Ivan said could technically come to Singapore, work out with local joint venture partners, and then can even come under the scheme where they can avail themselves of some of these tax breaks. Now, over and above that, I think insofar as key legal and regulatory hurdles are concerned, um, you know, immigration has always been a very I wouldn't say problematic, but I suppose for a long time it seems rather discretionary. So a lot of people have a lot of concerns over whether the managing director they're going to bring in from Texas is going to meet the requirements or not. But I think generally, if statistics would show that some of these concerns are actually not very well founded. So expat workers generally we're not very restrictive. I think it's quite transparent in a sense that, or at least with the introduction of some new evaluation metrics. It's intended to move towards transparency. So expat workers, whether you're seeking an employment pass or otherwise, it's relatively straightforward to come in. Even if you had come in under the old regime or the new, you should be able to, largely because it's a very a qualification-based approach. If you've got the experience, you've got the qualifications, you've got the skills necessary for the job, you should be getting it. There's no real discrimination between whether you should get a local employee or a foreign employee, unless it's at a certain level, like when you have work permits and so on. Now, over and above that, sure, we do have data protection and competition law regulations, but those are, if I may say, are as robust and probably to some extent maybe less burdensome than those you might find in the EU. So we do have them. But I don't think they're really in the way, or you might regard them as hurdles. They're pretty much part and parcel of the landscape in Singapore.
Thank you, Osman. That was really insightful. And it's important for companies to proactively address these challenges. Singapore is not only, heavily regulated, but it's pro-business also. That's the key point which I'm taking from there. Um, Bhargavi, my next question is for you. How can businesses use digital marketing strategies to enter the market?
Insofar as digital marketing strategies are concerned, in Singapore, one of the key points that we always have to address when we deal with anything digital is the flow of data, or a cross-border flow of data and personal information. There's an entire body of laws that relates to this, but a lot of it has got to do with compliance. We don't have a lot of problems with data flows and digital marketing that may come into Singapore, from anything relating to Amazon to right down to Taobao in China, and right down to anything even relating to TikTok and any people who want to market through TikTok. All these are available. There is very little that one have got to be concerned about insofar as how digital marketing can be done in Singapore. Now, but one of the critical considerations that we should have is actually how some of these actually now attract cybersecurity concerns. So there have been a lot of discussions online about how cybersecurity should be addressed. There is a body in Singapore that deals with cybersecurity, and I think unfortunately a lot of data protection and cybersecurity issues have caused some concern in the sense that it's increased the cost of doing business in Singapore because of the need to provide for such protections. So in the end, I think if you're concerned about the investment into digital technology and the like, Singapore is a very open market relating to this. However, there has been some development lately, but some people have expressed concern about this. But it's really got to do with some new laws relating to the protection of national interests when it comes to acquisitions by foreign parties. But the risk of that actually activating in any acquisition actually is very low. So there should not be any concern in relation to methods in which such things can curtail investment into Singapore.
Right. I think adding on to it, when a company is entering any new market, and they localize, the challenge that they face is normally like, how will you localize the content and all of those things. So I think Singapore or ASEAN is a very different market from the Europe market. And that's what we need to also consider, that you need to, when you serve the market as such, entering the market can be easier if you do a M&A deal or things like that. So, can you please highlight like how M&A can help, quickly expand into the Asian market? I think that will be what I think our audience would also be interested to know.
Oh, thank you, Bhargavi. Okay, so one thing we have to understand is that the Singapore market, as much as we are extremely open and pro-business, the markets around ASEAN are not necessarily similar. I won't say they're not as friendly. I'm just saying that the rules are different. The data protection rules in Indonesia are different from Singapore, so there's a need to understand how we can comply. But one thing's for sure, there have been because of no foreign exchange control in Singapore, other than the need to comply with AML requirements or anti-money laundering requirements, there has been a lot of inflows of capital into Singapore from, say, for example, Indonesia, right, where companies have actually set up in Indonesia. So companies that were originally set up in Indonesia actually then come back to Singapore to set up their base so that they can reinvest back into Indonesia. The same here happens for a number of MNCs that we know about. They set up in Singapore, then the Singapore company actually then controls everything else in Indonesia, in Vietnam, and elsewhere. I think insofar as connectivity is concerned, there is very little that is not understood between having a Singapore investment holding company that's at the top, or the top co, if you like. So in a sense that it is very common for you. It is a very easy conversation to have if you say that, can we from Singapore set up in Indonesia, or can we set up in Thailand, or can we set up in Vietnam? Everybody will understand that, oh, this is actually how it's done. This is actually how we apply in Indonesia, for example, for a PMA company. And then these are the requirements. Now, of course, I wouldn't want to go into that because right now it's about Singapore, but in terms of the capitalization of, for example, an Indonesian company would be different. So you need to comply with Indonesian capitalization requirements for an Indonesian company, in which will flow through from Singapore.
Yeah. So I think it makes very easy when you set up first in Singapore and navigate through the Asian market, spread your products and services. It's very easy once you've captured the Singapore market. I think that's what we probably take. And like Indonesia, India, and other parts of these places also helps you to have a product price strategies, everything in place very easily when you have just tapped into the Asia market. I think that's what probably we can also add on. So yeah.
Oh, yes. And by the way, because of the existence of a multitude of double taxation agreements,
Yeah.
it is also relatively easy for countries to navigate cross-border between the investment holding and into their subsidiaries in all the other countries around Asia. That's what I would add. Thank you.
Absolutely. One quick follow-up question. I was interested in know how can European companies protect their IP during negotiations with local partners or when acquiring Singapore-based firms?
Okay. Um, Thank you, Harpreet. The important thing about negotiating with any party in any part of the world actually is applying your commercial common sense relating to this. Intellectual property is important. I think one must be mindful that we always start the discussion on the basis of where your protections can actually be enforced. So it's important to understand at the end of the day that one of the key attractions about Singapore is that we have a very robust dispute resolution framework that encompasses SIAC for arbitration, that encompasses the Singapore International Commercial Court. If you want a court process to deal with your dispute, or you can ultimately then submit to the Singapore courts for all your dispute resolution needs. However, when you go cross-border, I think the clever thing that one has got to do is, other than your standard approach to having a proper, well-enhanced NDA or non-disclosure agreement to protect your rights, you do, I believe, because of the different jurisdictions you're dealing with. In Singapore, it can be quite quick for you to obtain an outcome for for dispute resolution. In some countries, it can take a very long time. So one has got to be very practical about how you want to protect your intellectual property rights so that you don't give too much away for you to then start a dispute and then after that try to find resolution for that, because it will take too long. So one should be very careful about that. In practice, an NDA would work. Most people will have an NDA, non-exclusive jurisdiction of Singapore courts, or SIAC if you need to. Then it's important to understand why you have the NDA. Is to observe obligations of confidentiality and other aspects of your ownership of the intellectual property. There's one other thing which I would usually advise clients who are venturing overseas from Singapore, is that a lot of Asia starts business on the premise of a very good and deep personal relationship with the parties you deal with. In many parts of the world, including Singapore, we tend to take the ability to enforce our rights for granted. But because you are crossing borders, it's always important to understand that this doesn't always happen like clockwork in many other countries. So if you don't developing the relationship will lessen your risk. So understanding how far you can go with this person, how well you've known the person. So in other words, what I'm also saying is that having to meet someone over 2 weeks in another country doesn't necessarily mean that you can get a deal done. In Singapore, you probably can, because it's extremely clinical. It's very transparent in Singapore. If you meet Mr. A and you know who Mr. A is, people will vouch for Mr. A for you. But in Indonesia, for example, or Vietnam, a character called Mr. A or Mr. B can be very hard. It can be very hard for you to understand where he comes from, how he might deal with you in business dealings, how you may or may not be able to trust him as much as you want. So to go beyond the ability to enforce is going to be important. So I would suggest that know the market well and build a strong enough relationship to deal with the risk of having to enforce your rights, especially in intellectual property, because they can easily be taken away from you.
Thanks, Asman. That was really fascinating. Ivan, my last question for you is scaling up a startup is a challenge, especially in a foreign market. After incorporating a company in Singapore, what should startups focus on in terms of scaling and building a local presence? How can European startups leverage Singapore's vibrant startup ecosystem to fuel their growth?
Yeah, great question. I think there's a couple of important factors. Talent is always so important in scaling and growing, and so spending the time and energy to build those relationships, to get to know people, to take advantage of the great talent in this part of the world, I think is a really important part of that. There is a really strong ecosystem of startups in Singapore, particularly a lot of asset management, a lot of wealth, a lot of family offices that are investing in startups. So it's a great place to fundraise. But Singapore, at the end of the day, can be a relatively small end market for startups. So startups will also very quickly in Singapore look to the region and look to scale, as the other my colleagues have shared on the call. So um, it's also important, I think, to try to get to know the opportunities in the rest of the region and to kind of understand how you'll have to customize and adapt to that. The great strength, though, of the Singapore brand is that people come here because once you're inside Singapore, once you're been able to access and you're using the Singapore platform, people know that with the regulations and with the rule of law here and with the requirements, that you will be trustworthy and that you'll be a reliable partner for that growth. So startups, I think, will find that that's a good investment as they try to grow to branch out. Many of the strongest, fastest growing startups, technology companies in this part of the world have based themselves in Singapore for that reason, to be trusted, also to have a valuable or a location for their investment. They'll be investing overseas, they'll be doing overseas, and they're looking for that support. Um, so I think that those are really valuable tools. So I think you'll find that the energy is great here, the networks, the incubators, the accelerators, and a lot of international companies are here. Startups are already here and growing their businesses. And I personally love working in that space, the energy and the excitement. We have markets here where every idea is new. We have hundreds of millions of new consumers, new middle class customers coming in and eager for solutions. So I love that opportunity and I love that the potential in that space and watching how rapidly many of the companies scale here.
I think I'll add on to what Ivan is saying. Andrew, probably you can throw some light on tax systems and capital gain and corporate tax. This comes from the audience. So, probably just one or two liners that you can probably add to what Ivan has been talking about.
Yeah, I was looking through some of the questions that have came in, and that one did spring to mind actually, which is something we talk quite a lot about. Singapore doesn't have capital gains tax, and still doesn't have capital gains tax. But at the start of this year, in compliance with sort of EU legislation, there was a tax code that was slipped in to the corporate tax system called 10L. And 10L, it's like it is applicable to European clients that are thinking about investing in Singapore, in the sense that if they set up a Singapore company, which then holds an offshore asset. So, say, for example, set up a Singapore company and that invests in a significant asset in Australia, say a solar farm or something like this. If you don't have any substance in Singapore, then, if you basically sell that offshore asset and remit the funds to Singapore, then it's caught by 10L, which basically means the gain can be subject to corporate tax at the rate of 17%. So effectively bringing in a kind of capital gains tax. So that's obviously something that needs to be planned around. Like obviously the best thing is to have substance in Singapore adequate to deal with 10L, because really that's what it's about. But sometimes substance is something that may or may not be able to do. So there's various things we can do around that, but like I think that one needs to also remind itself of the corporate tax system in Singapore, which is source and remittance based. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but the system compared to some global tax systems is very straightforward. So that the premise is did you source was the gain attributed to activity in Singapore, and then the second part is was did you remit the funds to Singapore? So with this capital gains TL situation, one thing to look at is can you put substance in Singapore, and then the other consideration is will you remit the gain into Singapore as well? And these are two things that can be considered to try and plan around that. But yeah, so that's what I would add about that, that some planning definitely needs to be considered when making these types of investments through a Singapore holdco.
Amazing. That's really insightful. And I'm amazed how we skipped NL. Okay,
Yeah.
the next question comes from the audiences. How the GDPR norms compliance can be ensured while data usage or transformed to parent companies in Europe? This is open to all our panelists. Anyone who wants to answer incoming. I'll repeat the question once again.
Yeah, well, look, I think I'm not a GDPR expert, but happy to basically just mention that in Singapore, you have what's called PDPA, is pretty much the same localized version of GDPR. And I think European companies that have a strong GDPR norm can pretty much localize that policy with a qualified PDPA specialist, and there shouldn't be too many variances really to GDPR. I think it's an easy transition to make. It's
I think that's the rest of the questions that have come up here looks like they've already covered during our session. And so the question was like how we can register a startup in Accra. Probably Ivan, if you want to add something that has not been added, but probably it's a very straightforward question.
Well, the great news is that it's almost instant. It's fairly
Now
straightforward.
process as Amitabh said.
So compared to some places, Singapore prides itself on how quick and easy that incorporation process can be, especially if you work with as a foreign entity, and you would need to work with a service provider to help you with that. But that's not one thing you need to worry about on your journey. Bank accounts, KYC, I think now are more of the process that will take a little bit of time. But again, we have a lot of experience about how to navigate that process. And then that's part of the strength of Singapore, that it is considered to have strong reputation and rules. Therefore, it will be trusted later on and you will be trusted later on. But that is part of the process you need to go through. That won't be a just one day process for most clients.
Right. Right. So I think it's normally just like 1 hour process to incorporate a company, and then you can navigate through the rest of the things very easily in Singapore. I have not seen it to be very, very complex process if you have all the right documents in place. And that is what we, tell all the businesses, like, make sure you have documents right. Okay. So I think adding on, and we are just dot on time for everything. One key takeaway that we have to, deliver, I probably just one sentence that all of you can add on. One key takeaway from this entire conversation that European businesses should take on today. So probably we start from Ivan navigates to everybody, one minute key takeaway that you thought is important for people to take today.
I hope people realize that it's very simple. You can incorporate your company as a foreigner, and you can control that company fully and take advantage of the Singapore platform relatively easily. You can apply for an employment pass for yourself, your key team, So Singapore is very much open for business and eager to continue to stay competitive with the other hubs out there.
Andrew.
Yeah, I think I would just add to that to reiterate that Singapore is not only open for business. It's, the political stability is amazing here. That that basically you can plan without with in the long term projects in Singapore to support the political stability stand apart. I think the one good thing that Singapore has done the last 5 years since I've been here is to digitalize the economy. Like everything's online now, and they continue to put more and more things online. So it makes setting up the company and interacting with all the government websites very streamlined. And even private sector now, insurance policies with big insurance companies, it relies on the corp pass and the individual digital passes that you and your company will get. It's very easy, very slick, and I think that's quite impressive. European people coming in setting up here.
I think the best part about Singapore is that everything is online. You can read everything online and then come to you guys to take a deep advisory. But I think the basic things people can definitely read online on government websites, which is very clear and straightforward out there. So, Amzan, what you would add?
Some people's that. Sorry, Bagavi. So don't tell people that, Bagavi. They won't come to us for advice.
That yeah, so the top level is definitely there. The deep down they have to come to you. No choice.
I think it's true that a lot of Singapore is online. Just a little bit of a bit of an anecdote. There exists something called a SingPass, which every Singaporean, everybody who's got a Singapore identity card of some sort, or even for employment passes and all that, you have a SingPass, and it kind of takes you to anywhere you want to go, from your driver's license right down to your bank account. But more importantly, I think about Singapore. Singapore is never about Singapore. I mean, Singapore is about the region. And I think it's always important to remember that when, well, for us especially in the professional services sector, when people come to us, we often notice, and we all know that at the end of the day, it is about bringing investors into Singapore so that they can bring themselves or avail themselves to the region. And fortunately, in Singapore, you will typically find an abundance of professional resources that can take you to the region. And that's always going to be very, very unique about Singapore. And that's the part which I would always say that, there's an open invitation to all foreign investors to come to Singapore, because from Singapore, then we'll take you to the rest of Asia.
Amitabh, would you like to add one line?
Yes, certainly, certainly. So, see, Singapore being Singapore, what it is committed to digitalization. Okay, so that creates new opportunities for businesses in sectors already in fintech, e-commerce, technology, shipping, oil and gas. So everywhere, this is where you should come. The city has got an amazing infrastructure which welcomes you, and it is ready to be a friend of yours, a guide of yours, and it can help you uh, take off to the entire of Asia and Asia,
Right.
including Asia. Yeah.
I think one of the questions that just came up from the live is like how and whom to approach the professional opportunities in Singapore. So I think in terms of professional opportunities, if you're looking at setting up the companies, here are the four kings sitting in the market. You can come and talk to these people how you can set up the business. But if you're looking at the job opportunities and all of those things, probably Andrew and Ivan, you can guide these people.
Well, Singapore's always looking for talent. A lot of people want to come to Singapore though. So actually I get this question almost every day. People want to get a job in Singapore. So there is a sort of a supply demand situation. So the companies have a good pick of the people, and then they have a limitation in terms of how many expats, foreign individuals they can bring in. So you have to make a good compelling proposition. to those companies. But the major job boards in Singapore, if you Google them, they have a long list of opportunities. Target those smaller companies that may not have so many foreign employees already. They have a more flexibility. Um, Play your networks, obviously. So, at this point, sort of a cold application to a Singapore company with a foreigner doesn't usually lead to much success. But if you play your networks and build up a relationship and you can show what you could bring to the table, then there's ample opportunities here. You can also come and set up your own company and employ yourself and grow your business yourself, and grow your practice or be as an entrepreneur here, which many people do as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think
The only
Singapore.
thing I would sorry for Garvey. I was just going to add to that. So not really much to add after what Adrian said, but just that in addition to like setting up your own company or using your network and so on, there is a new type of pass, which is a sort of high level pass called One Pass. So people that don't want to, when people want to be acting as a consultant, there's several multinationals bringing a sort of expertise into Singapore can apply for this pass, which doesn't link them to any particular company and allows them to sort of freelance around the various multinationals here. So that's quite a new pass that's been set up as well, and it's to attract high level talent.
Oh, I think that's really nice to know about this pass, and probably we can have a next conversation on this pass. So yeah, I thank you everybody today for joining us, and I think if anybody has further questions, they can drop us at info@digitalgo, where we'll get you all these four experts to answer your questions, and the panel has been just to the point to give you exact answers. I hope everybody is getting their answers clear, doubts clear, and you can just write more comments, and we are here to address all the questions. So thank you, panelists. Thank you, Andrew, Amitabh, Ivan, everybody out here. Thank you, everybody, for making time and guiding the European businesses, and I'm think the larger businesses also, like, because while we're talking just about the European business today, most of the things are common for all the businesses across the world. So I think Singapore is very welcoming, and Singapore as a country, I have been there in Singapore. I think a lot of it's very, very open. You would not feel a shift in culture, a shocking thing. It's very easy to come and adjust in Singapore. It's home to like most of us. So yeah, thank you, and looking forward to seeing you all in Singapore.